We want to get really clear on what our priorities are. So one of the things I talk about is a rearview mirror test. Imagine this, your future self, looking back at this very moment where you're feeling overwhelmed. What is it that you would have wished you could have told that person in that moment? Or what would you want to remember? It's probably not that you washed all the dishes and that your house looked spotless or that you knocked it out of the park at work and stayed over 10 hours. Those are the things we're constantly thinking about. But if we kind of fast forward and then have that perspective from a rear view mirror and what really matters and what do we really want to think about, I promise you the extra stuff starts to fall away really quickly.
Hey guys, welcome to episode number 122 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. If you have ever found yourself in that moment of, oh my gosh, I'm the world's worst mom, or even just, because usually we go that far, even just, oh my gosh, I'm really not being the best mom today, or wow, everyone else has it together but me in the parenting department, today's episode is going to be one you are going to want to watch. I brought onto the podcast, I'm so stinking excited, Albiona Rakipi. Albiona began her career as an early childhood educator, and she is currently a pediatric speech therapist. She's got this really beautiful in-depth understanding of children and families. How do we, as the bigger humans in said scenario, do all of this without guilt? Without a sense of overwhelm? Now we're like supposed to be balanced and perfect, and we're supposed to have it all together, and we're never supposed to feel guilty, right? She's doing a great job at helping us understand what we're going through and how we can break our own cycles while we're going through it. I thought it was just amazing. And what I hope you listen for is the concept of overwhelm being fluid. And I've never heard this kind of reframed this way. Now, Albiona has recently created a brand new resource for parents, and it's called the Parenting Reframe. She is now coaching parents one-on-one. She's got a podcast of the same name. She's starting to offer workshops, and this is on top of all of the contributions she's made to articles that are listed under this video. I mean, so many places where she contributes articles and is a regular writer to help us understand how to be the best humans while we parent other humans. It's a really, really gorgeous, beautiful business that she's created, and it's very, very helpful. So if you are suffering with mom guilt, right? We even cover dad guilt. That's a thing too. If you feel like things are so out of balance, pop in those earphones, because I'm pretty sure I swear. I don't think she does. She's very kind and very not swearing, but I probably do. So pop in those earphones and let's get to it. Albiona, welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast. I'm so happy you're here with us today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. Can I just say how much fun it is? Like, I have over this last year, I think, met so many amazing women, and you are one of them.
Aw, well, like ditto, right back at you.
And in watching my own coaching business, watching what's happened over the last 13 years, I can't believe it's been that long. I don't think I have ever had a woman who is a mother as well, not talk about burnout and overwhelm and guilt and like, oh my gosh, there's so much for me to deal with.
Definitely. I'm a parenting coach, so I definitely look at, mothers and overwhelm and mom guilt and how often it sort of comes up and rears its ugly head. And I think COVID in particular, these last 2 years have really highlighted how much we actually do. And quite frankly, in so many contexts and in so many different situations, it's just not a sustainable construct, right? We saw when kids were being asked to go to school virtually and parents were expected to stay home and work from home. And what resulted was you had women leaving the workforce in droves. You had people giving up on career. You had sacrifice. So there was so much that came out of it. And it really did impact women more so than men. So I think it's really interesting. It's an interesting time to have these conversations about overwhelm and burnout, because I would argue maybe even before COVID, maybe they would be brought up or maybe we would say some of those things, but it was still pretty quiet. You still didn't admit it. You still kept going. You still kept that, chin up. You didn't really just look at one another and go, oh my God, I'm struggling, or I'm really exhausted, or how do people get through their day? I felt like people were still pretty, kind of keeping that tight to the chest. So the beauty in it is that I think what COVID did is it allowed us to all kind of go, oh, you too? like you are drowning in stress and in overwhelm, and oh, you also can't manage working from home and trying to help your first grader learn to read and do math, and meanwhile the Zoom screen isn't working. Like there's just it just compounded to end up, and it ended up being just so many challenging scenarios, like one after the other. So I think the best takeaway is that we're having these conversations. And
Mm,
what I love too is in a coaching session, even though I'm talking to parents, it does always boil down to overwhelm. It does always come back to this idea
mm.
of like, how do we manage this? What do we do with this? And how do we not let it completely be our state at all times, sort of that
Yeah.
chaotic, frenzied state.
We know now that we're overwhelmed, but how do we know when we're hitting the point of burnout? Like what does that look like from what you've seen with your clients and the people you talk to?
I kind of tell my own story with this one too. And I say it, a personal story because I think it mirrors so many of other people's stories. But I just found myself wanting to do nothing other than stay home and not go anywhere and not do anything and just lay on the couch. And the funny thing about it was I simultaneously was feeling very guilty that that's what was happening. Like, why am I just laying around? Why aren't I doing anything? I have so much to do. You go on social
Ah,
media and you see people like, I read 2 books during the break and I got all my Christmas shopping done and I did this and this and this and I hosted 2 dinners and there was like just this laundry list of people just getting all these things done. And you're seeing it and I just really did nothing. And I remember going to work that Monday and people going like, how was your break? What'd you do? And it was funny to even say nothing. Like I did nothing. I literally did nothing. And
mm,
so fast forward like a week later, and I'm still in a little bit of this state of mind where I just feel like I can't quite get my bearing. I don't really know like what project to tackle first. I'm just kind of complacent. I'm not doing anything. And I'm
mm.
listening to Glennon Doyle's podcast, and Brene Brown was the guest, and she was talking about Atlas of the Heart. And she starts talking about this exact concept and burnout and overwhelm. And so they asked her, what do you do? What do you do with burnout? Or what's the answer? And she said, oh, it's nothingness. Like she literally used that word. Nothingness is the answer to burnout. It's the answer to overwhelm. It is when you feel like you just cannot do one more thing. Like you just absolutely have to stop. And
Mm.
I heard it and I thought, oh my gosh, it just felt like very freeing. Like, oh, that I needed to do that. Like my body recognized what my mind wasn't letting me recognize. I think giving yourself permission sometimes to just embrace the nothingness, if that's really what you're feeling like doing, go with it. It also sort of strengthens that muscle inside of us, that little trust muscle, meaning when our instincts are saying, hey, slow down, stop, when you learn to trust those instincts that are there for you, to let that intuition guide you, that overwhelm starts to lose a little bit of its power because you start to sense it and see it and you really let it, you respond to what it's there to show you in that moment.
I think it's so important that we tell the truth about this. And when you've been working with parents going through this and they hit that wall, they're overwhelmed, that burnout is there. What advice do you give them in that moment?
Some of the tools that I give and that I use myself and that we talk about a lot when working with a parent who's really getting to the end of their rope or really feeling that way. There are a couple things we think about. It could be challenges within the home setting. So we want to first get a handle on that. What tools, what strategies, what things are going to help them with connect with their child, attune to their child's needs, figure out sort of what's going on. How do we interpret that behavior? That's one piece of it. The other piece of it is I look at patterning. So what I mean by that is we want to see what's your response pattern to stress, to overwhelm, when things get chaotic. What I do try to tell parents is life is fluid and it's constantly changing. And there isn't sort of one set of rules that's applicable. So, what I mean by that is when we're in a state of overwhelm or when things like the pandemic happen, we want to get really clear on what our priorities are. So, one of the things I talk about is a rearview mirror test. Imagine this, your future self 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, looking back at this very moment where you're feeling overwhelmed. What is it that you would have wished you could have told that person in that moment? Or what would you want to remember? It's probably not that you washed all the dishes and that your house looked spotless or that you knocked it out of the park at work and stayed over 10 hours, that week. Those are the things we're constantly thinking about. But if we kind of fast forward and then have that perspective from a rear view mirror and what really matters and what do we really want to think about, I promise you the extra stuff starts to fall away really quickly and you focus your energy and your time on the things that matter to you, right? And then once you have a sense and you have that clarity of like what's a priority right now and what really matters, like, all right, we have to figure out what we're eating in our house. We
Mhm.
have to figure out what my daughter needs. This is going to be a team effort. Maybe I'm going to figure out what support I need as a parent, right? All of your priorities start to change completely. So
Right.
every time they start to come at us and every time we start to think, oh, I need to do this and oh, I need to do that. Wait a second. Right now, this is where my energy has to go. Doesn't mean
Mm.
forever, right? But
Right.
think of it as fluid, right? Overwhelm is going to change contingent on what's happening in your life. And you want to have a way to sort of stand in the chaos with a little bit of stillness and really parse out in this very moment, what is it that I need to attend to? What is it that I am wanting to devote my energy to and time and go from there?
And I love the idea that it does change like that, because when you're in it, doesn't it feel like it's going to last forever? You're like,
Yes. I'll think back at a time in my life that felt so overwhelming in that moment. And I have enough space from it now. So I have enough distance from it that when I look back, I think I did that.
you also said something that I think is really important, and that is, on top of everything you experienced, you felt guilty on top of it.
Yes.
Like, what is the deal with the mom guilt?
Mom guilt is an interesting one. And you're exactly right. That weekend, I felt guilty for doing nothing. And I think that's connected to a couple of things. I think we've sort of subscribed to the notion that our value lies in our productivity. When that sort of busyness starts to look different, it leaves you to sort of wonder, like, well, now what? So you start to
Mhm.
feel guilty. I talk to parents a lot, moms in particular, about mom guilt. And I go kind of through 3 steps. You're never going to not have mom guilt. It's not going anywhere. But when it comes to visit, you're going to have at least a little kind of step by step guide so that you can recognize it, see it, and then keep it moving, right? So the first thing I do is I just name it and without any kind of judgment. So I'm not even getting into a ton of reasons yet. I'm just knowing that I'm feeling guilty, but I'm not judging it. And I'm not even trying to correct it. Because one of the things that happened when I was talking to moms is the second that guilt hits us, we combat it with some type of a mantra like, no, I am worthy. You
Yes.
can't just go from, I feel guilty, like, nope, nope, nope. I'm coming in with a good mantra. You have to do the work, right? And then unfortunately, the work of it isn't always fun. So just name it. No judgment, just name it. Feeling terribly guilty. It's consuming me. And
Love.
then we go into the statement of, I feel this way because you start to really recognize that what we're really feeling is we're not doing enough. We are not
Yes.
enough. We haven't given enough, right? Anytime we fall a little bit short, that's that internal dialogue. And then the last piece of it is you want to ask yourself after your list of because, is it true?
Mm.
And 9 out of 10 times, it's not true. Is it true that you're a bad mom because you had a 5 minute delay at getting to a game? It's not. Do you think another mom who might show up 5 minutes late is a bad mom? No. We let that internal dialogue really take over and we gave it the power that it really doesn't deserve. When you walk around with guilt, like who are you serving? I mean, not yourself, not the people around you.
Well, my mind's been officially blown.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful right now. This is awesome.
Oh, I'm glad.
Um, it sort of brings up, I get a question a lot as you've done work with clients and people writing, even for, Detroit moms, all the stuff that you
Mhm.
get to do. Is dad guilt a thing?
Dad guilt is definitely a thing. I think the difference between dad guilt and mom guilt is dads are in a little bit of a unique position right now because the role of dad has changed so much, right? So it went from sort of being more hands off, provider, not necessarily like in there playing with the kids, but just kind of held a very sort of patriarchal position in the home. A lot of dads didn't have another dad, like didn't have a dad that modeled it in a way that we see today, right? So
Right,
we
right.
have dads that are more hands-on. So I think it's interesting when I look at dads, I think a few things come up and I actually have worked with fathers as well and I find that often with fathers there is a sense of never feeling quite sure or confident in the decisions that they're making.
Is there a way for us to look at the guilt that we feel in the busyness, specifically talking to moms, and then the dads second guessing themselves? How do we look at balance
Mhm.
now?
Yeah.
Especially kind of as the world has changed. I feel like the world has just changed so much in the last few years. How do you talk about balance to people? What do we need to know about that right now?
Balance is going to look different every single day. So instead of approaching it like I feel balanced when, and giving yourself these big, broad, sort of lofty things to think about. I would say, like, for instance, today, balance for me is making sure I get A, B, and C done while I'm at work, making sure I'm present for the children that I'm going to serve at work, making sure that I am doing the things I need. So when I sit down with Sarah this evening and have this conversation, that I'm really, present and engaged and really serving. So I think it's important to think of balance as, again, fluid. What do I need today? And the only way it works, the only way that this plan is effective is if you're willing to do weekly check ins. And what I mean by that is at the end of the week, look back at your week and ask yourself, what did balance look like this week? Was I listening to myself? Was I following my gut? Was I doing the things that I had promised myself that I would do to take care of myself? Not the promises to others, right? Those promises to yourself.
Well, I don't know about you, but I am like, I could take a nice deep breath right now.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I
I
mean,
feel better.
that's another thing too, is like giving yourself a physical prompt. Like, I know Mel Robbins, she has the 5-second rule, and that's a really good one. I use that a lot with parents and coaching too. And that's honestly just counting backwards from 5. So the second you just feel yourself in that space where it all starts to feel like, "Duh, I'm going to blow right now," you just kind of go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. It's just enough time to interrupt that pattern, right? So there are good things, for some people, it's 2 to 3 deep breaths, right? Just feel yourself inhale, feel yourself exhale. For some of the kiddos that I work with that might struggle with feeling anxious, they'll just tell them to rub their hands. So sometimes they'll just take their fingers and go inside the palms of their hands. So it's just a physical prompt to redirect that thought pattern and interrupt it a little bit so they don't get in a loop.
I think if there's one way that I could reframe what you did that sort of just lifted 100 million pounds off my shoulders, thank you so much,
Aw, I'm so
is
happy.
just this idea that it's all fluid. I can definitely have, I'm going to call it a childlike perspective of like, well, it's always just going to be this way now. I guess that's it. Right? It's like that idea of like, I'm just going to be overwhelmed for the rest of my life. The end.
Well, it's interesting because I think that another sort of lesson that came out of COVID too is this idea that we clung to the idea of certainty. And it was just a fallacy anyways, right? But as parents, we want to really provide this sense of safety and certainty and predictability for our kids. And that's great. We do to a certain extent want to provide a safe space. But we know that there's just so much out of our control. You're just hoping it could be something different, but just you're better off just kind of looking at it instead of creating that stress, just saying, well, it is this, and now what, right? So yeah, the fluid part is really helps you kind of stay balanced in spaces that aren't, right? And parenting is overwhelming. I mean, I'm not here to tell parents that, like, oh, it doesn't have to be or it's not going to be. It's like, no, it is.
Yeah, but I love the honesty behind your work, Albiona. I just do.
Oh,
It's
thank
like, can we
you.
just tell the truth? This is really freaking hard. Like, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, it's hard.
Because I think so many people, like you said at the beginning, they're just pretending like it's all fine.
Yeah.
Like it's like, it's fine. I'm totally about to fall apart and just drop dead, but I'm fine.
Exactly. It can feel terribly overwhelming, and we all just agree it is the best thing in the world. We know, right? Any parent knows it. So there
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this justification or over explanation on like, oh, but I'm so fortunate to be a parent, and we know, right? I feel the same way. It doesn't mean that you don't have moments where it just doesn't get the best of you sometimes.
Well, this has just been awesome. I'm so
Aw.
grateful you were here. We have so many people listening who are parents and are struggling with these exact issues. And even those who
Yeah.
aren't parents, we have so many who are struggling with overall family issues, right? Where that feeling of like they don't feel supported by their family or they feel overwhelmed when they're with their family and understanding what that's like. And this has just been
Mhm.
so helpful. So I'm so grateful. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you. I love talking to you. So that's awesome.
I believe though that you have a free gift for our listeners. Is that true?
Yeah, so I do one-on-one coaching with parents. So if you head on over to the parentteenreframe.com, that's the name of my website, I have a guide and a script for parents to download, and it goes through different ways to help your child listen. So, and I called it Stop Googling, How Do I Get My Kids to Listen and Just Do This Instead. So, and that was literally plucked out of a coaching session because I had a parent say, I constantly Google, how do you get your kids to stop listening? And I just can't seem to find the answers. So go ahead and just go onto the website, get this guide. It'll walk you through some of my strategies. I've been working with kids for over 20 years. So a lot of it is just trial and error and things that I've learned and things that children have taught me throughout the years. So a lot of those strategies are there, and you have a lot of free resources on the website. Then I also host my own podcast by the same name called The Parenting Reframe. And we go over a lot of like the same types of tips and tricks. And we talk about overwhelm. And we also talk about what to do when your child swears, or what to do when, all these other difficult things come up, or how you sort of unpack different challenges. So we reframe a lot of parenting ideas and expectations. And really, I try to get to the root of like, what are those subconscious beliefs that and expectations you've placed on yourself, because that governs a lot of the way you parent. And sometimes those are things we can let go of if we really kind of sit with it and pay closer attention.
It's so great. It's so great. You guys, for those of you watching on YouTube, we will have those links under the video. Those of you listening, it's in the show notes. Make sure you go grab that. I love the idea of scripts. That's so brilliant, because it's really what you want, right? I always say kids don't come in with manuals.
That's right.
So nice if they did. But it's like sort of to go and grab that and actually have a guide of like, oh my gosh, this is how I can deal with this. So helpful. You guys, make sure you grab that. Make sure you go and subscribe to her podcast as well. So exciting.
Thank you.
And Albiona, I can't wait to watch your journey. I know you're expanding and you're doing more things, and you're getting out there to do more wonderful things to support people inside this amazing, challenging time that we're living through. So you guys, make sure when you head over to her website, you check out all the different things that she has going on, because it's pretty dang cool.
Yeah, it's definitely growing and changing and evolving based on just what I'm being asked to do. So it's been awesome. It's been a cool journey to kind of connect with different parents, and they'll say, gosh, I really wish I could, have you do this. And I'll say, oh, well, let's figure out how we can do that for you.
For those of you business owners, I hope you heard what she just said. She's constantly listening to her market and making sure that she provides what's needed most. That's huge.
Yeah.
All right. I love it. Albiona, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for having me.